This unit is all about how lighting can be used in photography to make pictures more unique and how to make the different qualities of light show through in your pictures a bit more. In our first unit, we talked about aperture, shutter speed, and ISO as part of the exposure equation. This unit is going to cover available light and focal length, which is the lens that we're using on our camera. There are four basic things that fit into lighting. We have the quality of light, color, quantity, and direction. Our first learning target is going to cover quality and color. I want you to understand the differences in quality of light. So that's hard or soft light, the color of light, warm and cool, and natural versus artificial. I also want you to be able to use both of those to your advantage when you're taking pictures. First thing we're going to talk about is the quality of light. So quality of light refers to how hard or soft a light source is while you're photographing your subject. Your subject is whatever the purpose is behind your picture, whether it be a person, landscape, architecture, macro pictures of something. And you're going to choose what you photograph, sometimes based on how the lighting looks on that subject. Sometimes you can change the quality of light if you have your own light source you're using, but a lot of times you might just be using the natural light that's available to you in a situation. All of these images use natural light, even though one of them is indoors. It's just the window that's being used to let light in for the picture. And they all have different qualities of light being shown. This image is very soft. The reason that it's a soft light is that the sun is cast through this mist and it's very low in the sky and it's being diffused, so the light has become very soft. In this picture, with the biker, we have direct sunlight being used and it's quite high in the sky still. So the edge of the shadow when you're close to an object is very sharp. In this one, we just have a small slit of light coming through this window, but that light is dispersed in such a way that it's pretty hard on our subject. So if you look at the shadows here on the bench, I guess this is the desk, those lines are very sharp, so it'd be a hard light source being used. Okay, when you're looking at these two images, you're going to see two different qualities of light again being used. This one is very soft and this one is very hard. I want you to click this link to open up a great video that talks about the different qualities of light. This is Lindsay Adler, who's a famous photographer, and she's going to be talking about how you change the quality of light. We'll flip back to our presentation here. The reason that there are different qualities of light and our eyes are noticing them is that we're looking at something called shadow edge transfer, which is us looking at the edge of a shadow and seeing how that edge is dispersed. Here's our definition of shadow edge transfer. So we're looking at the edge of the shadow to identify what type of light is being used, whether it's hard or soft, by seeing how blurred or crisp the edge of the shadow is. So when you look at these two pictures, one of them has a greater shadow edge transfer because the edge of the shadow transfers over a greater distance. Whereas the other one, which is a harder light source being used, that shadow edge is much more narrow. It's a smaller shadow edge transfer. Here's a close-up view of that softer light example. So where that red light or red line begins to where it ends is a great distance. So that's a larger shadow edge transfer, which is soft light. Whereas this one is a very narrow shadow edge transfer. Those red lines are very close together. So what does hard light look like? Well, like we were saying with our shadow edge, there's going to be more defined lines for the shadows. The smaller shadow edge transfer. There's also going to be something called lower dynamic range. This means that we might have really great highlights and shadows in a picture, but our midtones are going to be a little less apparent. How can we make hard light? Well, you can make your light source smaller, or you can have it further away from your subject. So our example in these two pictures are sunlight, and the sun is very small in the sky and very far away from us, so it produces a very hard light. That's what the slide is saying. Perfect example. So these two images here are showing direct sunlight on a subject, and the shadows that we see are very, very sharp. Some reasons why we might want to use hard light is that it can create a pretty dramatic look in a photo. So low-key photography, for example, when you have a real dark background and you have a hard light being used, oftentimes that's going to be a real dramatic look. You can also use hard light to show textures and details a little bit more, like this picture of the hand. Because of that hard light that's being used and it's coming from the side, we can see a lot more of the texture in that hand. Soft light is just the opposite of hard. So instead of having more, we have less defined lines for the shadows. Instead of having a lower dynamic range, we have a higher dynamic range, which means we still have really great dark areas and bright areas of the picture, but our midtones are a lot more pronounced. How do you make soft light? Well, you're going to have your light source be larger, and you're going to have it move closer to your subjects, as seen in these two examples. So instead of thinking of a sunny day, think of a cloudy day and how the clouds have the diffusing effect on the light. So as the sunlight goes through the clouds, it diffuses it and makes it really soft. And that's what this image is showing here. Why you might want to use soft light? Well, you can have that soft light wrap around your subject a little bit more easily. Like in this image, we have a person who's got a hat on. Because of the soft light, we don't see a sharp shadow, which might make it hard to see the person's face. You can also use a soft light to disguise unwanted textures, like wrinkles or scratches on an object. These are going to be things that you can use soft light for. Our next topic is going to be the color of light. Different light sources are going to have different colors for light, which the camera captures in the photograph. So you actually have two things that are going on here with the color of light when we're thinking of it as a component of light. You have the actual color of the light that's being used, but then you also have the camera, a digital camera, deciding what type of light it thinks it's capturing. And that can change whether or not it's more warm or cool. So you can use color in really great ways in your pictures to really adjust how interesting a photo can be. Like this image that's on the right hand side here, there's two color filters being used on studio lights to affect the portrait. So all of the light is going to fall in a spectrum of warm to cool, depending on the light source that you're using in an image. Here's a spectrum of light for common lights that might be used for pictures. And it goes from warm all the way to cool. We've got all these different types of light that have a different hue to them. Light temperature is a way that we record how warm or cool a light source is. So a camera is going to capture a picture with a certain type of white balance, and that's the term that we'll learn in the next slide here. And that white balance is going to be how it records the type of light for how warm or cool it is. So even if you go to a hardware store and you're buying a bulb, it's going to have an output of a certain Kelvin for its warm or cool nature. So here's white balance. White balance is the setting that we can actually change in our camera to make it so that the camera collects the light with the color that we want. So for the most part, you'll probably leave it on auto white balance when you're taking a picture. But if you notice the camera is having the picture be a little bit too warm or cool, you can change the white balance as you're taking the image, so that way you can capture the light the way you want it to be. So my rule of thumb is to always keep it on auto unless you're noticing your pictures are turning out too warm or cool. It's pretty easy to tell between these two images on the top which one was photographed at the correct white balance. And that's the one on the right hand side here. This one, it's much too warm. So if you can get the white balance just right, it looks the way our eyes would probably see it, and that's what your goal would be. Down below here we've got 3 pictures. One of them is with the white balance correct. The other 2 are changing the white balance. Now it's not to say that they're totally wrong. You could choose to have the light source be a little bit cooler or warmer to get a different mood in a picture. So some of this is up to you as the artist to decide what you think is best. Like in this image here, it's a great picture of a sunset. Or more around dusk. We're not seeing the sun in this one, but it's during the golden hour. But the photographer could choose if they prefer to have more of a warm or a cool color. So this is a cooler side and this is the warmer side. And it has a different mood in a picture. Here are just some examples of cool light that are artificial. Warm light that's artificial. Tungsten is an important word to know. Tungsten is the name for regular incandescent bulbs. Natural light cool examples are going out at midday, being in the shadows. On a cloudy day, it's going to be cooler. And sunrise and sunset are going to be very warm, and obviously fire or candle, something like that, is going to be very warm as well.